I'm Chelsea Barrett, 35, and last weekend, my rep as the family protector? Yeah, it totally backfired. The piece I'd worked my butt off to keep solid for my son Jacob? It blew up into a full-on family meltdown at our so-called happy reunion. My sister Camille, that certain someone we all know, straight up demanded I let Jacob toughen up to their standards, and when I clapped back, the room went dead silent. "You're embarrassing us all," Camille yelled, with everyone staring like I'd just set the table on fire. But here's the tea. Their shade didn't break me. It lit a spark. I'm not just pushing back. I'm about to flip the script and change everything. Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from, hit subscribe, and stay with me for the most satisfying revenge you'll ever hear. Looking back, it's almost unreal what I did once that fire was lit. I stood in the driveway of Aunt Linda's sprawling estate, gravel crunching under my sneakers, Jacob's small hands sweaty in mine. His sensory issues make crowds tricky, and I could already feel his fingers twitching, a sign he was overwhelmed before we even stepped inside. The reunion was a yearly ritual, a showcase for my family to flaunt their wealth and pick apart anyone who didn't fit their polished mold. I'd spent years dodging these events, but this time Mom's guilt trip, "It's for family, Chelsea, don't be selfish," had worn me down. Jacob's blue eyes darted to the mansion's towering windows, where silhouettes moved like sharks circling. "Mom, do we have to?" he whispered, his voice barely audible over the distant hum of chatter. I knelt, brushing his sandy hair back. "We'll stick together, buddy. Promise." My heart ached, knowing together might not be enough against what waited inside. The front door loomed, polished oak with a brass knocker shaped like a lion's head, gaudy like everything my family worshipped. I adjusted Jacob's noise-canceling headphones, his shield against the sensory chaos of clinking glasses and loud laughter. My own shield? A forced smile and a mental mantra, just get through it. I'd been the family outcast since I chose single motherhood over their expectations of a proper life. No husband, no corner office, just me and Jacob, scraping by on my freelance graphic design gigs. They never let me forget it. Every reunion was a gauntlet of pitying looks and veiled insults, but this year felt different. Camille's emails had been sharper, hinting at something planned. "We need to talk about Jacob," she'd written. My stomach twisted just thinking about it. I pushed the door open and the foyer hit us like a wave, crystal chandeliers, the smell of lavender air freshener, and a buzz of voices. Jacob clung tighter, his sneakers squeaking on the marble floor. Aunt Linda swooped in, her perfume choking the air. "Chelsea, you made it! And Jacob." Her eyes lingered on his headphones, her smile tightening like she'd tasted something sour. "He's fine," I said, sharper than I meant. She raised an eyebrow but waved us toward the dining room. My cousins, uncles, and aunts filled the space, their designer clothes screaming money. Camille stood at the far end, her red dress clinging to her like a second skin, her husband Greg at her side, all fake charm and Rolex gleam. She caught my eye, her lips curling into that smirk I'd hated since we were kids. "Chelsea," she called loud enough to turn heads, "so brave of you to come." Jacob tugged my sleeve, his voice small. "Can we go home soon?" I squeezed his hand, my jaw tight. "Soon, buddy." But inside I was already bracing for the storm. Camille's talk wasn't going to be a conversation. It was going to be an ambush. I could see it in the way she tilted her head, like a queen sizing up a peasant. My family had always treated me like I didn't belong, but targeting Jacob? That was a line they'd regret crossing. I'd spent months preparing for this moment, digging into secrets they thought were buried. Camille's perfect life wasn't so perfect, and I had proof. My phone, tucked in my pocket, held photos, messages, and a truth that could shatter her glass house. I wasn't here to play nice, I was here to protect my son. The dining room was a battlefield disguised as a family gathering. Long tables groaned under platters of roasted duck and glittering wine glasses. Jacob's eyes widened at the spread, but I knew better than to let him near the food yet. Camille's rules always came first. She clapped her hands, drawing everyone's attention. "Let's sit, shall we? We have so much to catch up on." Her voice was syrupy, but her eyes locked on me, sharp as knives. I guided Jacob to a corner seat, hoping to keep him out of Federated States of Micronesia, the spotlight. He fidgeted, overwhelmed by the noise, and I rubbed his back, whispering, "You're okay." My family's stares felt like weights, Mom's pity, Dad's indifference, Camille's disdain. I scanned the room, mapping exits, just in case. I wasn't running yet, but I needed to be ready. Camille approached, wine glass in hand, her heels clicking. "Jacob looks delicate," she said, loud enough for nearby aunts to glance over. "Those headphones, is he always this clingy?" A few chuckles rippled through the room. My face burned, but I swallowed it, forcing a smile. "He's sensitive to noise. It helps." Camille raised an eyebrow, sipping her wine. "Sensitive? Must be hard for you." The jab landed and I felt Jacob shrink against me. My hand tightened on his shoulder, my mind racing. "Keep it together, Chelsea, not yet." I'd known this was coming, but the sting was sharper than I'd expected. Camille thrived on control, always had. As kids, she'd steal my toys just to watch me cry. Now, she had a bigger audience and a crueler game. I glanced at Greg, her husband, across the room, laughing with Uncle Ron. He looked so smug, so untouchable. My phone felt heavy in my pocket, not for long. I'd spent months tracking his lies, fueled by a late-night call from a friend who'd seen him with another woman. I didn't believe it at first. Greg, the golden boy? But the evidence piled up. Photos, texts, hotel receipts. I'd planned to confront Camille privately, but her cruelty toward Jacob changed everything. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about showing them who they were messing with. "Let's get some air, buddy," I whispered to Jacob, leading him to the patio. The night air was cool, and he relaxed a bit, pointing at the stars. "Look, Mom, the Big Dipper." I hugged him, my resolve hardening. Inside, Camille's laughter echoed through the open doors. She thought she'd won. She had no idea what was coming. The patio's quiet gave me a moment to breathe, but my mind dragged me back to memories I'd rather forget. Jacob sat cross-legged on the stone tiles, tracing constellations with his finger, his headphones muffling the distant clatter of the reunion. I leaned against the railing, the cold metal biting into my palms, and let the past creep in. My family's dismissal of me wasn't new. It had been a slow, steady grind since I was a kid. I was always the odd one out, the dreamer who didn't fit their blueprint of success. While Camille was paraded for her straight-A report cards and pageant crowns, I was the one sketching in notebooks, lost in stories I'd never share. They called it wasting time. I called it surviving. I was 10 when I won my first art contest, a citywide competition for a mural design. I'd spent weeks on it, sneaking to the library to study color theory, my fingers stained with charcoal. The prize was a $50 gift card and a certificate Dad tossed in a drawer. At dinner, Camille's piano recital got an hour of praise, her discipline, her grace. My mural? Mom barely glanced at it. "That's nice, Chelsea, but art won't pay the bills." I remember staring at my plate, peas blurring as tears stung my eyes. I wanted to scream, but I swallowed it, like always. That night, I hid the certificate under my bed, where it yellowed with time. High school wasn't any better. I got a scholarship to a summer art program, one only 5 kids in the state were chosen for. I was bursting to tell them, but at dinner, Camille's acceptance to an Ivy League prep course stole the show. Dad toasted her with wine, saying, "This is what hard work looks like." I mumbled about my scholarship, and Mom's response was a distracted, "Oh, that's cute." Camille smirked, twirling her fork. "Art's a hobby, Chels, you'll figure that out." I left the table early, my hands shaking as I shut my bedroom door. I didn't cry that time. I started planning. I'd prove them wrong, even if it took years. When I got pregnant with Jacob at 27, unmarried and scraping by, the family's judgment turned vicious. Camille called it a mistake, her voice dripping with pity at Mom's Christmas party. "You could have been something, Chelsea, if you'd made better choices." I stood there, one hand on my swelling belly, the other gripping a glass so tight I thought it'd shatter. Mom didn't defend me, she just sighed and changed the subject to Camille's promotion at her law firm. Dad didn't even look up from his phone. I left early, drove home, and cried in my car, promising Jacob, still just a flutter in my womb, that I'd protect him from their poison. I built a life for us, piece by piece. Freelance design gigs paid the rent, barely. I taught myself coding to take on bigger projects, staying up past midnight while Jacob slept, his soft snores keeping me grounded. Every small win, a new client, a glowing review, felt like defiance. But the family never cared. At reunions, they'd gush over Camille's vacations to Paris, Greg's tech startup, their perfect marriage. My work? "Oh, you're still doing those little drawings?" Aunt Linda once said, her smile sharp as glass. I'd nod, biting my tongue, but each jab carved deeper. Back on the patio, Jacob's voice snapped me out of it. "Mom, why don't they like me?" His eyes were wide, searching, and my heart cracked. I knelt beside him, brushing a lock of hair from his forehead. "It's not you, buddy, they just don't get us." He nodded, but his lip trembled. I hugged him tight, his small frame warm against me. Inside, the reunion's noise swelled. Camille's laugh, sharp and deliberate, cut through the rest. She'd always known how to twist the knife, especially when it came to Jacob. His sensory issues were her favorite target, a flaw she could exploit to feel superior. I'd seen her whisper to cousins, their eyes flicking to Jacob's headphones, their smirks mirroring hers. I stood, my hands clenching into fists. The memories fueled me, each one a brick in the wall of resentment I'd built. They'd ignored my victories, belittled my choices, and now they were coming for my son. I wasn't the kid hiding certificates anymore. I'd spent months digging, fueled by a tip from a friend about Greg's late-night meetings. The evidence was on my phone, texts, photos, a paper trail of his affair. It was my ace. My way to hit Camille where it hurt. I wasn't just here to survive the reunion, I was here to end her reign. "Ready to go back in?" I asked Jacob, keeping my voice steady. He nodded, slipping his hand into mine. I squared my shoulders, the weight of my plan settling over me like armor. Camille thought she could break us. She was about to learn how wrong she was. Jacob's hand trembled in mine as we stepped back into the mansion, the dining room's chatter hitting us like a wall of heat. I guided him to our corner seat, my eyes scanning the room for Camille. She was holding court near the head of the table, her laughter sharp, her red dress a beacon of control. My phone burned in my pocket, a silent reminder of the secret I'd built, a weapon forged in late-night fury and quiet determination. I wasn't just here to endure their jabs, I was here to protect Jacob, and that meant dismantling Camille's perfect world. The memory of how I'd uncovered her husband's affair played in my mind, vivid as the crystal chandelier glinting above us. It started 6 months ago, with a call from my old friend Tara, who'd never bought into my family's facade. I was washing dishes, Jacob asleep upstairs, when my phone buzzed. "Chelsea, you didn't hear this from me," Tara said, her voice low, "but Greg's been sneaking around." I froze, sponge dripping in my hand. Greg, Camille's golden husband, the tech mogul who could do no wrong? I didn't want to believe it. Their marriage was my family's pride, proof of Camille's better choices. But Tara's words stuck, a splinter I couldn't ignore. "I saw him at a bar with some woman," she said. "Not a business meeting, Chels. They were cozy." I thanked her, my voice calm, but my pulse raced. This wasn't gossip. It was a crack in Camille's armor. I started digging. It wasn't easy. My days were packed with work, and Jacob's needs, his therapy appointments, his meltdowns when sounds overwhelmed him. But at night, when the apartment was quiet, I became a detective. I scoured social media, cross-referencing Greg's posts with his business trips. A photo from a conference in Miami showed him at a rooftop bar, a woman's hand on his arm, her face just out of frame. I saved it, my fingers trembling. Then came the texts. A friend of a friend who owed me a favor worked at Greg's company. She got me screenshots, flirty messages to someone named Lila, sent from a burner phone Greg thought was untraceable. "Miss you already," one read, timestamped during Camille's charity gala. My stomach churned, but I kept going. The real breakthrough came by accident. I was at a coffee shop working on a client's logo when I overheard a woman on her phone. "Lila's moving to Chicago," she said. "Yeah, some tech guy's paying for it." My ears pricked. I didn't know if it was my Lila, but I followed the thread. A deep dive into public records showed a Lila Harper renting an apartment in Chicago, paid for by a shell company linked to Greg's startup. I found a hotel receipt emailed to his work address. Careless, arrogant. It was from a weekend Camille had bragged about hosting a couples retreat alone. Piece by piece I built a timeline, a story of betrayal Camille didn't see coming. Every discovery was a battle. I'd sit at my kitchen table, laptop glowing, Jacob's weighted blanket draped over my shoulders for comfort. Doubt crept in. Maybe I was wrong, maybe I was obsessive. But then I'd think of Jacob, his small face crumpling when Camille mocked his headphones at last year's reunion. "Why can't he just be normal?" she'd said loud enough for him to hear. I'd held him as he cried that night. promising I'd never let them hurt him again. That promise drove me. I wasn't just collecting evidence, I was building a shield for my son. Back in the dining room, Jacob fidgeted with his fork, his eyes darting to the crowd. I rubbed his back, whispering, "You're doing great, buddy." Across the room, Camille caught my gaze, her smile razor thin. She raised her glass in a mock toast, and my family followed, their laughter a chorus of exclusion. My hand slid to my pocket, brushing my phone. The evidence was there: photos, texts, receipts. Enough to shatter Camille's smug facade. I'd planned to confront her privately, and maybe after the reunion, to spare Jacob the fallout. But her cruelty was escalating, and I could feel it building tonight. She wasn't just targeting me anymore, she was coming for my son. I leaned down to Jacob, adjusting his headphones. "Want some juice?" I asked, keeping my voice light. He nodded, and I stood, heading for the drink table. Aunt Linda intercepted me, her voice dripping with pity. "Chelsea, it must be so hard raising him alone." I forced a smile, my fingers tightening around a glass. "We manage." She patted my arm, her rings cold against my skin, and walked away. I glanced back at Jacob, his head bowed, tracing patterns on the tablecloth. My chest ached. He didn't deserve this. None of it. Camille's voice cut through the noise. "Chelsea, join us. We're talking about normal family traditions." The word normal landed like a slap, and a few cousins chuckled. I took a slow breath, my mind flashing to the folder on my phone labeled Greg. I wasn't ready to use it yet. I needed the right moment, when her cruelty peaked, when the whole room would see her fall. But the weight of it steadied me. I wasn't the invisible girl anymore. I was a mother with a plan, and Camille was about to learn what happened when you pushed too far. The dining room's glow felt suffocating as I returned to Jacob's side, the weight of my phone in my pocket a quiet anchor. Camille's jab about normal traditions still hung in the air, her voice lingering like a bad smell. Jacob was picking at his napkin, shredding it into tiny pieces, a sign he was nearing his limit. I smoothed his hair, whispering, "We're okay, buddy," but my eyes were on the clock above the fireplace. 7:30. The reunion was just getting started, and I could feel the tension coiling tighter, like a spring ready to snap. Tonight wasn't just about surviving their judgment, it was about setting the stage for what I'd planned. Camille's cruelty was a ticking bomb, and I was ready to light the fuse. Earlier that day, I'd been at home, pacing our small apartment, the evidence against Greg burning a hole in my mind. Jacob was at his sensory therapy session, and I'd sat at the kitchen table, staring at my laptop. The folder labeled Greg was open. Photos of him with Lila at a rooftop bar, her hand on his chest, texts planning a weekend in Chicago, the hotel receipt that tied it all together. I'd printed copies, tucked them in an envelope, and hidden it in my purse. My plan was simple but brutal. Confront Camille when her cruelty peaked, expose Greg's affair in front of everyone, and walk away with Jacob, leaving her to choke on the wreckage. But doubt gnawed at me. What if it backfired? What if they turned on Jacob instead? I'd pushed the thought away, focusing on the promise I'd made to protect him. Now, in Aunt Linda's dining room, that promise felt heavier. The table was a showcase of excess: silver platters, wine bottles with French labels, a centerpiece of roses that probably cost more than my rent. My family milled around, their voices a hum of self-congratulation. Mom was at the far end, fussing over a cousin's new engagement ring. Dad was deep in conversation with Uncle Ron about stock portfolios. Camille and Greg held court near the head of the table, her hand on his arm like a prop in their perfect couple act. I watched Greg laugh, his teeth flashing and my stomach twisted. He didn't know I knew. Not yet. I guided Jacob to the buffet, hoping food might distract him. "Want some mashed potatoes?" I asked, keeping my voice soft. He nodded, but his eyes kept darting to the crowd, his shoulders hunching under the weight of their stares. I spooned potatoes onto his plate, my hand steady despite the storm in my chest. Camille's earlier comment had set the tone, and I knew more was coming. She'd always loved an audience, and tonight, with the whole family gathered, was her stage. I could see it in the way she moved, deliberate, like a predator circling. Jacob was her target, and I was the obstacle she'd humiliate to get to him. As we returned to our seats, Camille approached, her heels clicking like a countdown. "Chelsea, you're so dedicated," she said, her voice loud enough to draw eyes. "It's sweet how you hover over Jacob. Must be exhausting." Her smile was a blade, and a few ants nearby exchanged glances. I felt Jacob stiffen beside me, his fork clattering against his plate. "We're fine," I said, my tone flat but firm. Camille tilted her head, her earrings catching the light. "Are you? He seems so fragile. Maybe he'd do better in a different environment." The implication hung there, somewhere away from me. My blood boiled, but I kept my face neutral, my hand resting lightly on Jacob's shoulder. "He's exactly where he needs to be." She smirked, sipping her wine, and sauntered back to Greg. I exhaled slowly, my fingers brushing the outline of my phone. The envelope in my purse felt like a live wire. I'd wanted to wait, to choose the perfect moment, but Camille was pushing faster than I'd expected. Her cruelty wasn't just words anymore, it was a performance, and Jacob was the prop. I glanced at him, his head bowed, his headphones slightly askew. "You okay, buddy?" I whispered. He nodded, but his eyes were glassy and my heart cracked. I couldn't let her keep hurting him. The room's noise swelled, laughter, clinking glasses, the hum of self-important chatter. I scanned the faces, Mom's forced smile, Dad's indifference, cousins whispering behind their hands. They'd all bought into Camille's narrative, that I was the failure, the one who chose struggle over success. But they didn't know the half of it. I'd spent years building a life for Jacob, clawing my way through freelance gigs, sleepless nights, and their endless judgment. And I'd spent months building something else, a truth that could topple Camille's throne. Her perfect marriage, her perfect life, was a lie, and I had the receipts. "Chelsea, dear," Aunt Linda called, her voice syrupy, "why don't you tell us what you've been up to? Still freelancing?" The word dripped with pity, and a few heads turned. I forced a smile, my fingers tightening on Jacob's hand. "Yeah, still freelancing. Keeps us busy." The table went quiet for a beat, then Camille laughed, sharp and deliberate. "Busy surviving, you mean?" The room chuckled, and Jacob's hand twitched in mine. I squeezed it gently, my resolve hardening. Let them laugh. Let them think they had the upper hand. They were about to see what I was made of. I leaned down to Jacob, whispering, "We're stronger than they know." He looked up, his small smile a flicker of trust. I straightened, my eyes locking on Camille across the room. She was watching me, her smirk daring me to fight back. I would, just not yet. The night was young, and her cruelty was only beginning. When the moment came, I'd be ready. The dining room's chatter felt like a tightening noose as I sat beside Jacob, his small hand still shredding the napkin into confetti. Camille's earlier jab about him needing a different environment lingered, a poison seeping into the air. The table was a stage now, and she was directing the scene, her every word calculated to cut. I kept my eyes on Jacob, watching his chest rise and fall too quickly, a sign his sensory overload was creeping in. My hand rested on his back, steadying him, but inside I was a coiled spring, my phone's weight in my pocket a reminder of the bomb I could drop. Camille wasn't done though, she was just warming up, and I could feel the room tilting in her favor. Dinner was in full swing, plates clattering, wine glasses clinking, my family's voices a chorus of self-congratulation. I tried to keep Jacob focused, cutting his potatoes into smaller bites, whispering about the stars we'd seen outside. "Remember the Big Dipper?" I said softly. He nodded, but his eyes kept darting to the crowd, his headphones slipping slightly. I adjusted them, my fingers brushing his cheek. Across the table, Camille caught the movement, her lips curling into that familiar smirk. She leaned toward Aunt Linda, her voice just loud enough to carry. "It's so sweet how Chelsea babies him. Must be why he's so delicate." A few cousins chuckled, their eyes flicking to Jacob, then away. My jaw tightened, but I kept my face neutral, slicing another piece of potato for him. The condescension wasn't new. They'd always treated me like a charity case, the single mom who chose struggle over their version of success. But targeting Jacob was a fresh low. I scanned the room, cataloging their faces. Mom's tight smile as she avoided my gaze, Dad's focus on his wine, Uncle Ron's loud laugh at some joke I didn't hear. They were all complicit, letting Camille lead the charge. She thrived on this, her cruelty a performance for their approval. I wanted to stand, to call her out right then, but I held back. The envelope in my purse, photos, texts, proof of Greg's affair, was my leverage. Timing was everything, and I needed her to push further to give me the moment to strike. Camille stood, tapping her glass with a spoon, the chime cutting through the noise. "A toast," she announced, her voice bright but sharp, like a blade wrapped in silk. Everyone quieted, glasses raised. "To family," she said, her eyes locking on me. "To those who keep us grounded, and those who need a little extra help." The room laughed, a few aunts nodding sympathetically in my direction. My face burned, but I kept my eyes on Jacob, who was staring at his plate, his fingers twitching faster. I leaned close, whispering, "Ignore her, buddy, you're perfect." He gave a small nod, but his lip trembled and my heart twisted. She wasn't done. Camille set her glass down and walked toward us, her heels clicking like a countdown. "Chelsea, how's the freelancing going?" she asked, her tone dripping with pity. "Still scraping by on those little projects?" A cousin snorted, and I felt the room's eyes on me. I forced a smile, my voice steady. "It pays the bills." She tilted her head, her earrings glinting. "Barely, I bet. Must be hard, raising special needs on your own." The words landed like a slap, and Jacob's head snapped up, his eyes wide. I squeezed his hand under the table, my pulse pounding. "We managed just fine," I said, my voice low but firm. Camille didn't back off. She crouched slightly, eye level with Jacob, her smile all teeth. "Jacob, sweetie, don't you get tired of those headphones? You could try being part of the fun." His face crumpled, and he pressed himself against me, his hands covering his ears over the headphones. The room went quiet, a few relatives shifting uncomfortably. My blood roared in my ears, but I kept my composure, stroking Jacob's back. "He's good, Camille. Leave him alone." Her smile didn't waver. "Just trying to help. He'll never fit in if you coddle him." I wanted to lunge to wipe that smirk off her face, but I stayed still, my hand steady on Jacob's shoulder. My family watched, some with pity, others with amusement. Mom looked away, fussing with her napkin. Dad took a long sip of wine. They'd let this happen. Like always. Camille straightened, turning back to the table with a satisfied nod, as if she'd won a round. The chatter resumed, but the air felt heavier, charged with her victory. I glanced at my purse, the envelope inside calling to me. Not yet. She'd crossed a line, but I needed her to go further, to show everyone what she really was. Jacob tugged my sleeve, his voice barely a whisper. "Can we go?" I kissed his forehead, my resolve hardening. "Soon, buddy." I wasn't running. Not tonight. Camille thought she could humiliate us and walk away unscathed. She was wrong. I'd spent months building my case, and every cruel word she spoke was another nail in her coffin. I just needed her to keep digging her own grave. The dining room's hum felt like a swarm of bees, each laugh and clink of glass amplifying the tension knotting my chest. Jacob clung to my side, his shredded napkin now a pile of white flecks on the tablecloth, his breathing shallow despite the headphones. Camille's words, calling him delicate, suggesting he didn't fit, had left a raw wound, and I could see the hurt in his downcast eyes. My hand rested on his back, steadying him, but my mind was a storm. She'd gone after my son, and now she was about to push too far. The envelope in my purse, stuffed with proof of Greg's affair, felt like a ticking grenade. I was waiting for the right moment, and Camille was about to hand it to me. Dinner plates were cleared, replaced by dessert trays, chocolate tarts, creme brulee, all screaming wealth. Camille, ever the orchestrator, stood again, her red dress catching the chandelier's light. "Time for a little family tradition," she announced, her voice syrupy with control. "Let's share our favorite memories." The room clapped, aunts and cousins nodding eagerly. I tensed, knowing this was no innocent game. Camille's traditions were never kind. They were traps, designed to elevate her and crush anyone who didn't measure up. Jacob shifted closer, his shoulder pressing into mine. I whispered, "We're okay, buddy," but my eyes were locked on Camille, watching her scan the room like a hunter picking her prey. She turned to Jacob, her smile sharp enough to cut glass. "Jacob, why don't you start? Tell us a fun memory." The room's attention swung to us, a spotlight I couldn't dodge. Jacob froze, his hands gripping the edge of his chair, his face paling. My heart pounded, but I kept my voice calm. "He's good, Camille, I'll go." She raised an eyebrow, her lips twitching. "Oh, come on, Chelsea, let the boy speak. It's good for him to participate." A few relatives murmured agreement, but their pitying looks burning into me. Jacob's breathing hitched, and I felt his panic rising, a wave I couldn't stop. I leaned down, whispering, "You don't have to, buddy." But Camille wasn't done. She clapped her hands, drawing every eye. "Let's make it special for Jacob," she said, her tone mockingly sweet. "We'll set up a little spot for him to feel included." Before I could react, she gestured to a cousin, who grabbed a cushion from a chair and tossed it on the floor. Camille reached for a silver dog bowl from a side table, some gaudy decor piece, and placed it in front of the cushion. "There," she said, filling the bowl with scraps from the dessert tray. "Jacob can sit here and share his memory. It'll be cozy." The room went silent, a collective intake of breath. My vision tunneled, blood roaring in my ears. Jacob's hand tightened in mine, his body trembling. "Mom," he whispered, his voice breaking. I stood, pulling him behind me, my voice low but shaking with fury. "What the hell is wrong with you, Camille?" She didn't flinch, her smile widening. "Oh, relax, Chelsea. It's just a game. He needs to toughen up." A few cousins laughed nervously, but Mom looked away, her hands twisting her napkin. Dad stared at his plate. The rest of the family watched, some shocked, others smirking, none stepping in. I knelt beside Jacob, my hands on his shoulders, blocking him from their stares. "You're perfect, buddy. Don't listen to her." His eyes were wet, his lips quivering, and I felt a rage I'd never known. This wasn't just cruelty. It was deliberate, a public humiliation designed to break him. My family's silence was complicity, their inaction a betrayal. I stood, my hands shaking, and faced Camille. "You think this is funny?" I said, my voice cutting through the room. She shrugged, sipping her wine. "I think it's reality. You can't shield him forever." That was it. The line was crossed, and the grenade in my purse was ready to blow. I reached for it, my fingers brushing the envelope, but I held back. Not yet. I needed her to think she'd won, to let her arrogance peak. "We're done here," I said, loud enough for the room to hear. I took Jacob's hand, guiding him toward the patio doors. "Let's get some air, buddy." He nodded, clutching my hand like a lifeline. Camille's laugh followed us, sharp and victorious. "Running already, Chelsea?" Outside, the cool air hit my face, but it couldn't calm the fire in my chest. Jacob sat on the steps, hugging his knees, his headphones back in place. "Why does she hate me?" he asked, his voice small. I knelt beside him, my throat tight. "She doesn't hate you, buddy. She's just mean." But it wasn't enough. Words couldn't undo what he'd felt. I pulled him into a hug, his small frame shaking against me. My phone buzzed in my pocket, a text from Tara. "You okay?" I didn't reply. I was beyond okay. I was ready. Camille had gone too far, and the room had seen it. Her cruelty was my opening, the moment I'd been waiting for. Inside, the family was still buzzing, probably whispering about my overreaction. Let them. I had proof that would silence them all. Camille's perfect life, her perfect husband, was a lie. I wasn't just going to walk away. I was going to burn her world down. The patio's quiet was a stark contrast to the storm raging inside me, the night air cool against my flushed skin as I held Jacob close on the steps. His small body trembled, his face buried in my shoulder, the memory of Camille's dog bowl stunt searing my mind. That silver bowl, glinting under the chandelier, wasn't just a prop. It was a deliberate attack, a spectacle to humiliate my son in front of everyone. My family's silence, their averted eyes, had been gasoline on the fire. I stroked Jacob's hair, whispering, "You're safe now, buddy." But my voice shook with barely contained fury. My purse sat beside me, the envelope inside heavy with the truth about Greg's affair. Photos, texts, receipts. The moment had come. Camille's cruelty had peaked, and I was done waiting. I stood, helping Jacob to his feet, his hand clinging to mine. "We're going back in," I said softly, adjusting his headphones. His eyes widened, scared, but he nodded, trusting me. My heart ached, but this wasn't about running anymore. It was about showing them, Camille, Greg, the whole complicit family, who we were. I grabbed my purse, the envelope's edges sharp through the fabric, and led Jacob back to the dining room. The chatter hit us like a wave, but it faltered as heads turned. Camille stood near the head of the table, laughing with Greg, her hand on his arm like a trophy. She caught my eye, her smirk daring me to try something. Oh, I would. I guided Jacob to our seat, my movements slow, deliberate. The room's attention was a weight, but I used it, letting their stares fuel me. "Camille," I said, my voice clear, cutting through the noise. She turned, one eyebrow raised, her wine glass poised. "Something to say, Chelsea?" Her tone was mocking, but I saw a flicker of unease in her eyes. The room quieted, forks pausing, eyes locking on us. I reached into my purse, pulling out the envelope, my fingers steady despite the adrenaline surging through me. "Yeah, I do." I opened the envelope, pulling out the first photo, a grainy shot of Greg with Lila, their hands entwined at a rooftop bar. I held it up, high enough for the table to see. "This is your husband, Camille, last month Miami." The room went silent, a collective gasp swallowing the air. Greg's face paled, his smile frozen. Camille's eyes narrowed, but she laughed, sharp and forced. "What is this, some cheap stunt?" I didn't flinch. I pulled out the texts next, printed screenshots and read one aloud. "Miss you already, Lila. Chicago next weekend? Sent while you were at your gala, Camille." Her smile faltered, her hand tightening on her glass. Murmurs rippled through the room. Aunt Linda's mouth dropped open. Mom's napkin fell from her hands. Dad stared, his jaw tight. I kept going, pulling out the hotel receipt. "And this? A suite in Chicago, booked under Greg's company. Same weekend." I tossed the papers onto the table where they landed among the dessert plates, undeniable. Greg stammered, "Chelsea, this is misunderstood." But I cut him off. "Misunderstood? You've been cheating for months, Greg. I have more if you want to keep lying." Camille's face twisted, her composure cracking. "You're pathetic," she spat, but her voice shook. "Faking evidence to, what, get attention?" I stepped closer, my voice low but carrying. "Faking? I spent months on this, Camille. While you were mocking my son, I was digging up your husband's secrets. You wanted to humiliate us? Look at your perfect life now." The room was a graveyard, every eye on Camille. She turned to Greg, her voice rising. "Tell them she's lying." But Greg's silence was deafening, his eyes fixed on the table, his hands clenched. I turned to the family, my voice steady. "You all let her do this. You watched her put a dog bowl in front of my son and laughed. You've judged us for years, but this..." I pointed to the papers. "This is who you prop up, a liar and a cheat." Mom's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't speak. Dad looked away. The cousins who'd chuckled earlier were silent, their faces flushed with shame. Camille's hands shook, her wineglass clattering to the table, spilling red across the white cloth. I took Jacob's hand, his small fingers warm in mine. "We're leaving," I said, loud enough for everyone to hear. Camille lunged forward, her voice desperate. "You can't do this, you're ruining everything." I turned, meeting her eyes. "You ruined yourself." Jacob pressed against me, and I felt his strength, his trust. We walked toward the door, set the room's silence ringing in my ears. Camille's sob broke the quiet, but I didn't look back. The truth was out, and her perfect facade was ash. Outside, Jacob looked up at me, his voice soft. "Did we win, Mom?" I knelt, hugging him tight. "Yeah, buddy, we did." My heart was still racing, but for the first time that night, I felt free. The night air hit us as we stepped onto the patio, Jacob's hand warm in mine, the weight of what I'd just done settling over me like a storm breaking. Behind us, the dining room was a frozen tableau, Camille's sob echoing, Greg's silence deafening, my family's stunned faces etched in my mind. The envelope, now empty, was still clutched in my hand, its contents scattered across the table like shrapnel. I'd exposed Greg's affair, shattered Camille's perfect facade, and called out the family's complicity in her cruelty. Jacob looked up at me, his eyes wide but steady, his headphones snug against his ears. "Are they mad, Mom?" he asked, his voice small but curious. I squeezed his hand, my voice softer than I felt. "They're just surprised, buddy. We're okay." We moved toward the driveway, gravel crunching under our feet, the mansion's lights casting long shadows. Inside, the silence had cracked, murmurs rising, then shouts. Camille's voice cut through, shrill and desperate. "You can't just leave after that." I didn't turn back. My pulse still raced, but it wasn't fear, it was power. For years, I'd swallowed their judgment, their pity, their dismissal of me and Jacob. Tonight, I'd flipped the script, and the truth about Greg was only the start. I wasn't just walking away from Camille's cruelty, I was rejecting their entire toxic world. As we reached the car, the front door flew open, and Camille stormed out, her red dress stark against the porch light. Greg trailed behind, his face ashen, hands stuffed in his pockets. "Chelsea," she screamed, her heels wobbling on the gravel. "You think you can ruin my life and just walk away?" I paused, one hand on the car door, Jacob safely behind me. Her eyes were wild, mascara streaking, her perfect poise gone. I kept my voice calm, cutting. "I didn't ruin your life, Camille. Your husband did that. I just made sure everyone knew." She lunged closer, pointing a shaking finger. "You're jealous. You've always been jealous of me, of my success, my marriage." I laughed, sharp and cold, surprising even myself. "Your marriage? You mean the one built on lies? I've got nothing to be jealous of." Greg stepped forward, his voice low, pleading. "Chelsea, Let's talk about this. Privately. I shook my head, my eyes locked on Camille. No, Greg, you don't get to hide anymore. You both made this public when you went after my son. The porch light caught the faces of relatives gathering at the door, Mom, Aunt Linda, cousins, watching like spectators at a wreck. Mom's hands were clasped, her eyes wet, but she didn't move. Aunt Linda whispered something to a cousin who shook her head. They'd seen the evidence, heard the truth, but none of them stepped forward to stop Camille. Typical. They'd always let her run the show, even now when her world was crumbling. I turned to Jacob, opening the car door. Hop in, buddy. He climbed in, buckling himself, his small hands steady despite everything. Camille's voice rose, cracking. You're nothing, Chelsea, a failure who drags her kid down with her. The words stung, but they didn't land like they used to. I faced her, my voice steady, every word deliberate. You're wrong. I'm a mother who fights for her son. You're a bully hiding behind a fake life, and now everyone sees it. Her mouth opened, but no words came. Greg grabbed her arm, muttering, Camille, stop, but she yanked free, her face a mask of fury and fear. I slid into the driver's seat, locking the doors. Jacob reached for my hand, his fingers small but strong. You were brave, Mom, he said, his voice muffled by the headphones but clear in its trust. I smiled, my throat tight. So were you, buddy. As I started the car, Camille's shouts faded, drowned by the engine's hum. The mansion shrank in the rearview mirror, its lights blurring as we pulled away. My family's hypocrisy was laid bare. Their silence, their complicity, their worship of Camille's facade. I'd exposed it all, not just for me but for Jacob, to show him we didn't need their approval. The road stretched dark ahead, but my chest felt lighter, like I'd shed a weight I'd carried for years. Camille's perfect life was in pieces, and I'd done that. Not with cruelty, but with truth. I glanced at Jacob, his face lit by the dashboard's glow, his eyes tracing the passing streetlights. Want some music? I asked. He nodded, and I turned on his favorite soft piano playlist, the notes calming us both. We were done with their games, their judgment. We were free. The hum of the car's engine was a soothing contrast to the chaos we'd left behind, the dashboard's glow casting soft shadows across Jacob's face as he stared out the window, his headphones still on. My hands gripped the steering wheel, the adrenaline from exposing Camille's husband fading into a quiet resolve. The mansion, with its glittering lies and cruel games, was miles behind us now, but the weight of what I'd done, calling out Greg's affair, confronting my family's hypocrisy, still pulsed in my veins. Jacob's small voice broke the silence. Mom, are we going home now? I glanced at him, his blue eyes catching the streetlights, and smiled. Not yet, buddy. We're going somewhere better. I turned onto a familiar street, the one leading to Tara's house, my chosen family, the ones who'd never judged us. Tara had been my rock since high school, but the friend who'd tipped me off about Greg's affair and cheered every small victory in my life. Her cozy bungalow came into view, porch light on, a beacon of warmth after the cold sterility of Aunt Linda's estate. As we pulled into the driveway, Tara's front door swung open, and she stepped out, her curly hair a halo in the light, her arms already open. You made it, she called, her voice free of the pity I'd endured all night. Jacob unbuckled himself, a shy smile breaking through as he spotted her. We climbed out and Tara hugged Jacob first, crouching to his level. Hey champ, got any new constellations to show me? He nodded, his hands less twitchy now, and started pointing at the sky, naming stars I couldn't see. I watched, my chest loosening for the first time in hours. This was what family should be. Safe, warm, real. Tara stood, pulling me into a hug, her voice low. You okay? I got your text about the reunion. I nodded, but my throat tightened, the memory of the dog bowl flashing back. It was bad, I whispered. But I ended it. Inside, Tara's living room was a world apart from the mansion's icy perfection. Mismatched furniture, a coffee table cluttered with art supplies, and the smell of fresh-baked cookies filled the space. Her partner Mia was setting out mugs of hot chocolate, her smile soft as she waved us in. Jacob, I saved you the marshmallow one, she said, winking. He grinned, settling onto the couch, his headphones off now, the tension in his shoulders easing. I sat beside him, my purse on the floor, the empty envelope a silent trophy. Tara plopped down across from us, her eyes searching mine. Spill, what happened? I told them everything. Camille's taunts, the dog bowl, the family's silence. My voice shook as I described, holding up the photos, reading Greg's texts aloud, watching Camille's face crumble. Tara's eyes widened, her hand covering her mouth. "You did what, Chelsea? That's legendary." Mia laughed, shaking her head. I wish I'd seen her face. Bet it was priceless. I managed a small smile, but the weight of it lingered. "It wasn't about her," I said, glancing at Jacob, who was sipping his hot chocolate, oblivious to the details. "It was for him." Tara reached across, squeezing my hand. "You're a damn lion, Chels. Jacob's lucky to have you." Her words hit deep, a balm to the wounds my family had left. Here in this cluttered, warm room, I felt seen, not as the failure, the single mom, the outcast, but as a mother who'd fought for her son. Jacob looked up, marshmallow foam on his lip, and pointed to a sketch pad on the table. "Mom, can I draw?" Mia handed it to him with a pack of colored pencils, and he dove in, his focus a quiet strength I admired. Tara leaned closer, her voice soft. "What now? You think they'll come after you?" I shook my head, the memory of Camille's sobs and Greg's silence grounding me. "They can try, but I'm done with them." Mia nodded, setting a cookie plate between us. "Good. You don't need their poison." We sat there, the four of us, eating cookies and laughing as Jacob showed us his sketch, a wonky starscape with a smiley face moon. This was what mattered. People who saw us, who lifted us up, who didn't need us to fit their mold. As Jacob yawned, curling against me, I felt a peace I hadn't known in years. My biological family had tried to break us, but here, with Tara and Mia, we were whole. I'd exposed Camille's lies, but more than that, I'd chosen who my real family was. And they were right here, in this messy, love-filled room. The soft glow of Tara's living room lingered in my mind as I drove home, Jacob asleep in the back seat, his sketch pad clutched to his chest. The night's events, the dog bowl, Camille's unraveling, my family's stunned silence, felt like a fever dream. But the empty envelope in my purse was proof it had happened. I'd exposed Greg's affair, called out their hypocrisy, and walked away from their toxic world. Now, with the city lights blurring past, I felt a new urgency. Not to fight, but to protect what mattered. Jacob's steady breathing was a reminder of why I'd done it all. This wasn't the end. It was the beginning of a life where we set the rules. Back at our apartment, I tucked Jacob into bed, his headphones on the nightstand, his starscape sketch pinned above his desk. I sat on the couch, the quiet settling around me, and pulled out my phone. Notifications blinked. Missed calls from Mom, a text from Aunt Linda. "We need to talk, Chelsea." I deleted it without replying. They didn't get to dictate terms anymore. I'd spent years bending to their expectations, swallowing their judgment to keep the peace. No more. I opened my laptop, pulling up my freelance portfolio, the designs I'd poured my heart into. This was my strength, my world, and I'd build it stronger. For Jacob, for us. The next morning, I sat Jacob down at the kitchen table, his favorite blueberry pancakes steaming between us. "Buddy," I said, cutting into my stack, "we're making some changes." He looked up, syrup on his chin, curious. "Like what?" I took a breath, choosing my words. "We're not going to see Grandma, Grandpa, or Aunt Camille for a while. They don't treat us right." His brow furrowed, but he nodded, trusting me. "Okay, can we still see Tara and Mia?" I smiled, my heart swelling. "Always." I spent the day drafting boundaries, a mental fortress to keep my family out. First, I blocked their numbers. Mom, Dad, Camille, even Aunt Linda. Their voicemails, full of excuses and guilt trips, went straight to trash. I emailed my cousins, short and clear. "Jacob and I are stepping back. Respect our space." I didn't owe them explanations. My family had watched Camille humiliate my son and done nothing. They'd lost their claim to us. I called Jacob's therapist, scheduling extra sessions to help him process the reunion. "You're doing the right thing," she said, her voice warm. "He needs stability, not chaos." By afternoon, I was at my desk, sketching a new logo for a client, the work grounding me. My phone stayed silent. No more family drama, just the hum of our life. Tara texted, checking in. "You good? Need me to bring pizza?" I grinned, typing back, "We're solid. Pizza tomorrow?" Her reply was instant, "Hell yeah. Jacob's picking the toppings." I laughed, the sound easing the last of the reunion's tension. This was our circle now. Small, real, safe. When Jacob came home from school, he was quieter than usual, his backpack dragging. "Did I do something wrong at the party?" he asked, sitting on the couch. My heart sank. I knelt beside him, taking his hands. "No, buddy, you did nothing wrong. Aunt Camille was mean, and that's on her, not you." He nodded, but his eyes were distant. Will they hate us now? I hugged him, my voice firm. They don't get to decide how we feel about ourselves. We're enough, just us. He leaned into me, and I felt his trust, fragile but unbroken. That night, I wrote a letter I'd never send, pouring out years of hurt, Camille's cruelty, Mom's silence, Dad's indifference. It wasn't for them, it was for me, a way to let go. I burned it in the sink, the ashes curling into nothing, like the hold they'd had on me. I looked at Jacob's sketch on the fridge. A smiley moon, a reminder of his resilience. We didn't need their approval. We had each other, and that was a fortress no one could breach. The morning sun filtered through our apartment's curtains, casting a warm glow on Jacob's starscape sketch pinned to the fridge. I sipped my coffee, the quiet of our small space, a stark contrast to the chaos of the reunion a week ago. Exposing Greg's affair and walking away from my family's toxicity had left me raw but resolute. I'd set boundaries, blocked their numbers, and started rebuilding our world. But now I needed to do more than protect Jacob. I needed to redefine what our family meant, on our terms. My freelance work, once a means to survive, was now a tool to create a legacy for him, one free from the Barrett name's shadow. I sat at my desk, my laptop open to a new project, a website designed for a local nonprofit that supported kids with sensory issues. The irony wasn't lost on me. My family had mocked Jacob's needs, but here I was, using my skills to help others like him. I'd taken on the project pro bono, pouring hours into it, sketching layouts late at night after Jacob was asleep. It wasn't just work, it was a mission. Every clean line, every carefully chosen color, felt like a statement. We weren't broken, and neither were the kids this organization served. Jacob deserved a world that saw his strength, and I'd build it, one design at a time. That afternoon I took Jacob to the park, his favorite place to decompress. He ran to the swings, his laughter light, his headphones off for once. I sat on a bench, watching him pump his legs, his joy a quiet victory. My phone buzzed, a message from the nonprofit's director. Your mock-ups are incredible, Chelsea. This will mean so much to our families. I smiled, my chest swelling. This was what my family never understood. Success wasn't a corner office or a mansion. It was this: making a difference. Giving Jacob a life where he could thrive. At home, Jacob showed me a drawing from school. A rocket ship soaring past stars labeled Mom and Me. We're going to the moon, right? He said, grinning. I hugged him, my throat tight. Yeah, buddy, all the way. That night, I emailed the nonprofit offering to train their staff on accessible design, something I'd taught myself to make my work inclusive for kids like Jacob. They jumped at the chance, and I felt a spark of purpose. I wasn't just freelancing anymore, I was carving out a space where Jacob's world was celebrated, not judged. Days later, I got a call from Tara, who'd heard about my nonprofit work through a mutual friend. Chels, you're a badass, she said, her voice warm. You're turning all that family crap into something good. I laughed, stirring dinner on the stove. Trying to, at least. She paused, then added, You're not just surviving anymore. You're building something. Her words stuck with me, a reminder that my family's rejection wasn't the end, it was the start. The Barrett name had always been their badge of superiority, but I was redefining it. Not for them, but for Jacob, for us. I started reaching out to other local organizations, offering my skills to create resources for kids with sensory needs, brochures, apps, even a sensory-friendly art workshop. Each project was a brick in the legacy I wanted Jacob to inherit, one of resilience, creativity, and compassion. At night, I'd watch him sleep, his face peaceful, and feel a quiet pride. My family had tried to diminish us, but we were rising, stronger than they'd ever know. The next week, at the nonprofit's office, I met a mom whose son was like Jacob, sensitive to noise, struggling to fit in. She teared up, thanking me for the website. It's the first time I've seen something made for us, she said. I nodded, my own eyes stinging. This was my legacy, not Camille's wealth or Greg's lies. Jacob and I were enough, and we were making the world better, one small act at a time. The soft hum of our apartment was a sanctuary, the late evening light filtering through the window as I sat on the couch, Jacob's latest drawing, a galaxy of crayon stars taped to the wall beside me. It had been 2 weeks since the reunion, since I'd exposed Greg's affair and walked away from my family's toxic grip. The silence from them was deafening. No calls, no texts, just the freedom of their absence. My laptop glowed on the coffee table, open to the nonprofit's website I'd designed, now live and already helping families like ours. Jacob was asleep in his room, his headphones neatly on his nightstand, his small chest rising and falling with the peace I'd fought for. I leaned back, a mug of tea warming my hands, and let myself reflect. Not on the pain, but on the strength I'd found. The truth that my worth wasn't tied to their approval. I'd spent years chasing my family's validation, measuring myself against Camille's polished life, Mom's expectations, Dad's indifference. Every reunion, every jab had been a reminder I didn't fit their mold. But standing up to Camille, holding up those photos and calling out their hypocrisy hadn't just broken her facade, it had broken mine. I wasn't the failure they'd painted me as. I was a mother who'd built a life for her son, a designer whose work lifted others, a woman who'd chosen love over resentment. The dog bowl, Camille's cruelest act, wasn't Jacob's shame, it was hers. And in walking away, I'd reclaimed our story. I thought of Jacob's smile at the park, his rocket ship drawing, his trust in me despite the chaos. He was my why, my compass. Every late night designing, every boundary I'd set, every project for kids like him, it was all for us, for the life we deserved. I didn't need my family's applause. I had Jacob's laughter, Tara's support, the gratitude of a mom who saw her son in my work. That was enough, more than enough. I stood, setting my mug down, and walked to Jacob's room. His starscape sketch glowed faintly under his nightlight, a reminder of his resilience. I adjusted his blanket, my fingers brushing his cheek, and felt a quiet peace settle over me. The Barrett name didn't define us anymore. We were Chelsea and Jacob, a team, unstoppable. I'd found my worth, not in revenge, but in the life we were building. One of love, purpose, and unapologetic truth. Have you ever had to walk away from people who didn't see your worth? I've been there, and let me tell you, it's hard. But it's freeing. I'm Chelsea, and I shared this story because I know what it's like to fight for your place, to protect someone you love, and to find peace in your own truth. If my journey resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to hear that it's okay to define success on their own terms. Drop a comment below. Tell me your story, where you're watching from, or how you've stood up for yourself or someone else. Your voice matters, just like mine and Jacob's did that night. Keep shining, keep fighting, and know that you're enough, exactly as you are.